Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Pokemon Alpha Sapphire. In the last one we reached Fortree City here, and now it's time for us to get a little further in. Looks as though that Pokemon can be found up on Route 120. Well, hello Steven, haven't seen you in... Looks at part count, 2 parts at most. Now, I knew to do this first because I played Ruby Sapphire Emerald years prior to this releasing, of course. But if it's your first playthrough, you might think, okay, I see Steven there. Nice to see him again, but I'll talk to him after I take care of the gym and move on that way. Thing is, we are currently blocked off from the gym until we actively go talk to him, so we need to go talk to him first. But otherwise, first, let's check out this house. This has been changed up here a little bit for Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. Yo, Kyle, I knew we'd meet again. What, don't know where you are? This is the Secret Base Guild, of course. Huh? What do you mean you never asked? Oh, you, no need to be shy, my boy. The Secret Base Guild is here to fully support everyone so they can have a secret base life full of adventure. We can give you hints on how to enjoy your base and items you can't get anywhere else. And best of all, coming here means you can always meet me anytime you want. You know, Kyle, that reminds me. You still haven't made yourself a team, have you? See, a team is made up of, like, the pals that hang out in your base with you. I guess you could call them friends, but doesn't team sound cooler? When you meet people on other bases, you can ask them to join your team. Nothing wrong playing alone, of course, but having some pals around sure can liven things up in your base. If you haven't tried it yet, I think you ought to give it a shot before you write it off. Oh, yeah, you've been collecting flags, little pal? Here at the Secret Base Guild, we assign ranks to all the teams based on how many flags they manage to get, see? The more secret bases you find, the more flags you snag, the higher you and your team will end up in the ranking. Huh? You want to know why we do that? Ain't it obvious? It's more fun that way. A bit of rivalry gets everybody fired up. And doesn't it seem full of adventure to be on an endless hunt for more flags? The higher your rank gets, the richer your base life will become. You'll see. So go out there and find those flags and then bring them here to show me. So let me give a gift to my fellow base fanatic for coming so far to see me here. And we get ourselves a proclamation. A proclamation will let you set the battle format that'll fly in your own base. There are lots of decorations with special and cool effects like that. Whenever you get a new bit of swag for your digs, check it out to see what it does, and enjoy the base life. So here at the Secret Base Guild, you can buy several decorations for your base you can't find elsewhere, but you can also talk to Aaron anytime you want to either have him count your flags, or to outright battle him, with the battle format here being single battles in specific, so I guess we're just going to fight him like this. And the reason I'm doing this is actually the first time we can see a new Pokemon. Aaron's sending out his Flygon. Secret Power, Fly, Earth Power, and Dragon Claw. Notably, it's holding a normal gem, so its first use of Secret Power is boosted in power by 50%. Flygon's a ground dragon type, so that means it's weak to Ice, Dragon, and Fairy, and immune to Electric, but because every Flygon also has Levitate, it's also immune to ground. Notably, Ice is a 4 times weakness. Flygon doesn't have any really bad stats, but it especially focuses on its physical attack and speed, making it incredibly usable as a fast attacker. And that's really good for me in specific because we're going to have one of these in the not-too-distant future, as this is the final form of Trapinch. It evolves from a Vibrava at level 45. How the hell he has one at level 23, I don't know, but to say that Dragon-type trainers have a bit of a history with cheating with the levels here and again is an understatement in the series. Hi, Lance, looking at you. I won't lie, though. I completely forgot that Aaron and his Flygon were a thing here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, because I think there was a character that did the same role in Ruby Sapphire Emerald, but they were not a unique design in my memory. Good work out there, Kyle. Huh, battling you felt like a real adventure. Let's do it again sometime. So the other thing notably that Aaron has for us is that if you steal flags from other secret bases, you'll get rewards as you get through them. Which is nice to have in general. I'm probably listening to the full set of them right now. But the sad thing about that for me is that I actively can't get any of those because of how I'm playing this. At least not yet. As I've effectively already mentioned, I'm using a fork of Citra for this LP. And while Citra had its own online server system you could use to do any kind of multiplayer stuff like that, this fork in specific doesn't have any of that yet. So I might eventually be able to come back to this LP and get the items from him, but that's not going to be for a long while. The big thing I will say is that he does have a Mega Stone that I can't get because of that I'll talk more about later down the line when we actively, I think, run into the Pokemon that can use that Mega Stone. At least I think we run into that Pokemon. It's one of the few things in this game I don't do for this LP, and at least it's because it's one of the things I literally cannot do on my own, which I'd say is a pretty standard thing to see on this site with Pokemon LPs, as Pokemon's required multiplayer to do everything in some form since the version exclusives were first introduced all the way back in Red, Blue, and Yellow, so at least it's something that's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. At this point, though, the only thing left in Fortree for us to explore is the gym. But like I said, we actively can't do that until we go follow Steven. You might be wondering why. Well, as we walk past it on this bridge, you might notice the gym is in the center of the town, and there's no one in front of it. But if you go down that ladder, you're actively blocked off by something that we can't see. So we need to go elsewhere first in order to actively come back here and do the gym. This has always felt kind of weird to me. Not the fact that they blocked off the gym behind some amount of story progress. That's been a thing since Gen 1 in some form. But compared to some of the other times you do something like this where you have to go through a sub-dungeon or other things like that, this is as easy as just going on to the next route, finding Steven, and then you're immediately good to go back and head back to the gym. It's just always felt kind of weird with the pacing of it. So we're actively seeing this trainer fight go off in speed up, and that's because this specific trainer, of course, has another new Pokemon for us. In specific, after you take out their Goldeen, they're going to throw out its evolution Seaking, which evolves from Goldeen at level 33. Pure water type, so it's weak to grass and electric. Seaking's got a pretty good physical attack stat and decent special defense on top of that. It's a fine and usable water type. I just think there's better ones to begin with. Ability-wise, you can either have Swift Swim or Water Veil, which we've talked about before. But its hidden ability is notably Lightning Rod, where if any damaging electric type moves are used, they're automatically drawn into that Pokemon before anything else in the field. There are times when that ability can be really neat. Using it on a water type, I think, is a little haphazard given how fragile they'd be to that. But I guess the mentality is you could use it in a doubles battle with something that's maybe 4 times weak to water or electric instead, and then have Seaking take the hit. Not my first choice for a water type or a hidden ability, though, in that regard. It's perfectly fine. It's usable. There's just largely better water types, but there's also a lot worse water types. I think the best way to put it with this specific Pokemon line is that in Gen 1, when there were only so many water types, it was a really reasonable option compared to some of the other ones, especially for how early you could find it. But at the same time, the stronger water types in Gen 1 are usually also available in any game that Seaking is, be it one of my favorite Pokemon ever, be it the Squirtle line, be it Magikarp and Gyarados especially. There are just better water types in most instances to what you would need rather than the Goldeen and Seaking line. Kind of surprised they never got a third evolution, thinking about it to potentially give it that extra boost to make it more usable, but oh well. Although there are many Pokemon that need that, and I'd say there are several that should get it before Goldeen and Seaking do at the end of the day. Notably, off the top of my head, we're coming up at the point in the game where we're going to be pretty much out of trees to use Cut on. So Jimmy's time in the party, even though they haven't really done much in combat for a good little bit here, is mostly coming to an end. I think after we reach the next major city after Fortree, there's like a single-digit amount of cut trees left in the game, but some of them are completely optional to run into anyway, and even then we're coming up on the point where we're going to be getting our final main team member relatively soon here. I'm trying to think. I want to say most playthroughs of Hoenn, I have my team complete around this route. There's actually a Pokemon you can find on this route that I've used as a 6th slot several times before. I just decided not to on this playthrough. I want to say the latest I usually complete a team... Oh, by the way, Chris is evolving. Yay, Sharpedo time. I think the latest I tend to get a full team together is either Gen 5, where I've definitely gotten Pokemon in Victory Road there before, but also technically Gen 7 in some regards. Mind you, that's also because one of my favorite Gen 7 Pokemon doesn't evolve until nearly endgame because it needs to be near a specific rock that's in one specific canyon. If you know, you know. Notably, upon evolution, Chris tries to learn Slash, which, hey, that's pretty decent. Normal type move with high physical attack and a decent crit rate, so that's going to replace Swagger. And with that, we now have a really decent fast mixed attacker water Pokemon. Which, there's actively a secondary reason I chose to use a Sharpedo here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire compared to what I usually do in Ruby Sapphire Emerald and maybe just evolve the Lotad all the way that you can find in the early game or things like that. Namely, Sharpedo is one of, I believe, 2 Pokemon here in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire that has a notably faster surf speed on water. One of the Pokemon I think has like a 1.5 times surf speed, but Sharpedo's upwards of twice as fast on water, which, if you know the latter half of Hoenn and how many surf routes there are, that is a boon that can speed up the latter third of the game tremendously, depending on how much you're actively doing on those surf-based routes. Also, hey, there's Steven, so we're coming up on where he is. Like I said, you really are just in and out of this route to go see him if you don't worry about the Pokemon trainers here. Which, honestly, I think I've had playthroughs of Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire and Ruby Sapphire Emerald both where I just ignore the other trainers on this route, at least at this point, and focus entirely on Steven. I'd recommend not doing that as much in Ruby Sapphire Emerald because, not for nothing, the upcoming gym leader in Ruby Sapphire Emerald, I'd argue, is one of the hardest in the game, if not the hardest. If only because it's just in a really good position against any of the starters you can have. Kyle, so, we meet again. How's it been? Have you been using the Mega Bracelet wisely? I suppose I needn't even ask, though. Not when it comes to you and your team. I wonder, have you noticed? There's something here you can't see. Now, if I were to use this device on the invisible obstacle... No, rather than describing it, I should just show you. That should be more entertaining. Kyle, are you and your Pokemon ready for battle? No. I'll wait here, so go get ready. The main reason I said no there is to check my inventory really quickly, because notably, I haven't read the description for the meteorite yet. A meteorite originally found in Meteor Falls you got at Mount Chimney. That seems like nothing, right? Keep that in mind. Try it on. I'm sure it'll fit you. Here we get the Devon Scope. A previously invisible Pokemon became visible to the naked eye. The startled Pokemon attacked. The Devon Scope allows you to actively see any Kecleons that are invisibly blocking your pathway, which I believe in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald was the only way to actively find Kecleon. Just as I expected. That's called a Devon Scope. It's a fantastic piece of tech that lets you see Pokemon in hiding. Consider it a gift from me. Take it. And one more thing. And he'll give you the Mega Stone for whatever starter you chose. This stone ranks as one of my top 5 favorite stones in existence. I have no doubt that your Pokemon will like it too. You know, Kyle, I like to see trainers in Pokemon who are trying their best. That's why I like you so much. It seemed as though something just shone for a moment in your bag. I'm sure I sensed the power of some kind of stone. A meteorite? Nah, it couldn't be. Let's meet again someday. So the reason I checked out the meteorite a moment ago is that throughout specific points in the game, its description and sprite actively update. It now gives off a faint glow. Ominous. I hope it's not radioactive, otherwise I'm in trouble. Notably, the Megastone that Steven gives you isn't for whatever starters in your party, it's specifically for the one you chose when rescuing Professor Birch at the start of the game. So in the case you traded with friends to get all 3 starters really early, you're gonna need to wait a good bit to actively get the other 2's Mega Stones, in the case you want them at all at that point. We'll talk about Mega Blaziken, though, when I actively get it in battle, because that Mega Stone is staying on Blaziken the rest of the LP, I'll tell you that much. So yeah, right here, there's an invisible obstacle in your way if you had tried to come down to the gym earlier, or being blocked by a Kecleon. And notably, that Kecleon just outright flees. That didn't happen in Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. Any Kecleon you revealed actively battled you, because there were only so many times you could actively catch a Kecleon without, I believe, having to go back to the end game and reset their spawns, I believe. Grass Knot's a bit of an interesting move. If memory serves, and future me correct me on this, I think that does more damage based on the weight of the target Pokemon, which can make it very powerful in certain instances. Yo, how's it going, Chantabee Kyle? Fortree Gym Leader Winona is a master of flying-type Pokemon. She's waiting at the back of this gym behind the rotating doors. She's waiting for new challengers who are trying to take wing. Okay, go for it. Fortree Gym can be a little bit of a surprise difficulty spike, especially in the original Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, depending on what your team layout is, as its focus on flying type isn't too bad at first, but then you realize, oh, when they're fully evolved, 2/3 of the starters are weak to flying, and the third, while not necessarily weak to it, half of its attacks that it could use with stab literally have no effect on them. That part can be rough. With that said, most of the trainers here aren't that bad. It's mostly just Winona themselves at the end that can be a potential issue. The main gimmick are these little thin walls on a central pole that block your progress through the main route. But when you walk into a flat face in them, they'll rotate in the direction you walked into them in, and then you have to loop back around and make your way through the linear path. In my memory, in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, this is one of the more sprawling and potentially difficult to navigate gyms in the game, only probably second hardest to the 7th gym. But looking back at the maps, I definitely over-exaggerated it in my memory. Though depending on what your type layout is, it could definitely still be a rough gym. They still overall simplified it here for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, though, as they largely did with most of the gyms, with the only real exception in my memory being the first gym, because it's almost 1-to-1. And when we eventually get to it, the 8th gym, which I'll talk more about when we get there. With that said, time for our next new Pokemon. This specific bird tamer is bringing out a Dodrio. This evolves from Doduo at level 31. Normal flying type, so it is weak to rock, electric, and ice, but immune to ground and ghosts. Dodrio, in general, is a very fast physical attacker with okay defenses on the whole. It's there to be kind of fragile and get some quick physical damage in. It's a perfectly usable flying type. I think I've actively had playthroughs where I skew, say, a Pidgey or a Spearow in Kanto and just wait until I get a Doduo, and it works perfectly fine. One of the bigger weaknesses of this line, though, is that its signature attack that it learns upon evolving is Tri-Attack, which is a normal type attack, yes, so they do get stab on it. But it actively uses the special attack stat, which in Dodrio's case is notably lower than its physical attack stat. Tri-Attack, though, can be a pretty interesting move to use, because it can inflict either paralysis, burn, or freeze. So if you want to rely on status ailments in some strategies, using certain held items or other moves that maybe do more damage when there are status ailments in play, like Facade, not a bad attack to have around all the same. Notably, Dodrio's abilities can either be Runaway, Early Bird, or Tangle Feet. Runaway, as I believe we've already talked about, just makes it easier to escape a given battle. Early Bird, I believe, halves the amount of turns it takes the Pokemon to wake up in the case the sleep status ailment is thrown on top of them. Meanwhile, Tangled Feet actively raises the Pokemon's evasion if they have the Confusion status active, which is an interesting one, but it's a little too haphazard for my tastes, honestly. Either way, save on up, because it's time for Winona, who in the original game could be one of the harder gym leaders for sure. I'm Winona. I am the leader of the Fortree Pokemon Gym. I have become one with bird Pokemon and have soared the skies. However grueling the battle, we will triumph with grace. Witness the elegant choreography of my bird Pokemon and me. Silly Winona, Bird was a dummied out type they never actively used. Winona here in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire is going to start off with her Swellow. Guts for its ability, Quick Attack, Aerial Ace, Double Team, and Endeavor. Guts, notably, if the Pokemon has a status condition, its physical attack stat is increased by 50%. So relying on status ailments for this specific Pokemon might be a little risky, but depending on what you inflict it with anyway, there's probably a chance it's not going to be able to attack much anyway, so far from the worst thing. Given our level differences at this point across most of the team, a good Ice or Electric attack is more than likely going to take it out in 1 to 2 shots here. The big issue will be if it raises its evasiveness too high too quickly, but oh well. I think that's the first time we've seen a gym leader use an item, which I want to say is correct, because I think she's the first one that can also use an item here in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. She has access to 2 Hyper Potions just like she did in Ruby and Sapphire. Next up, Winona's sending out her Ace, her Altaria. Notably, this has Natural Cure for its ability, so if she swaps it out for any reason, it'll heal any status ailments you inflicted on it. Earthquake, Dragon Breath, Cotton Guard, and Roost for its attacks, which can get a little bit nasty pretty quick in the case you have something weak to Dragon, but also Cotton Guard can boost its defense pretty quickly, and Roost is a pretty effective heal. With that said, it's a Dragon Flying type, so it's weak to Rock, Ice, Dragon, and Fairy, but immune to Ground, and since Ice is a 4x weakness, pretty quick to take out in that regard. Altaria themselves, though, I love as a Pokemon to use. I've used one as a Dragon type several times across my playthroughs of Hoenn, and it's pretty easy to get relatively early, too, because it evolves from Swablu at level 35. Next up, Winona has thrown out her Pelipper. Keen Eye for its ability, Water Pulse, Roost, Protect, and Aerial Ace. Roost is probably the biggest issue here, again, depending on how much damage you end up dealing. But that said, because Keen Eye just makes it so that they actively can't lose any accuracy, you're probably in the fine as long as you're being pretty offensive against it. Otherwise, though, with Altaria, notably stat-wise, they focus very much on their defenses. Their special defense especially is notably high, but they don't have any stats I would really consider bad. They're just in general really good, and they got even better here in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire because they got a Mega Evolution, which, well, I could talk about right now. There's one specific place down the line that makes for a very convenient place to talk about it because one can actively show up there. So I'm gonna save that conversation for then. Just know in general, Mega Altaria is even better. It's arguably my favorite Mega Evolution I can use in the game outside of the one we're about to see, because it's time we finally talk about Mega Blaziken. So Mega Blaziken notably gains 10 extra defense, 10 extra special defense, 20 extra speed, 20 extra special attack, and a whopping 40 extra physical attack. On top of that, this is a bit of an interesting note where the Blaziken line's hidden ability is the same as its Mega ability. This thing has access to speed boost, where at the end of every single turn, its speed stat will get boosted by 1 stage. Meaning if you have this thing in a battle for a long period, outside of Trick Room shenanigans being pulled, you're not getting outsped in basically any case, more than likely. Never before have I seen a trainer command Pokemon with more grace than I. Just to wrap out Winona, even though it's already taken care of, her Skarmory also has Keen Eye for its ability, so you're not lowering its accuracy. Sand Attack, Air Cutter, Steel Wing, and Aerial Ace. Depending on the order she throws out her Pokemon, the Skarmory could be a little bit of a cruel twist depending on what type you're relying on doing super effective damage to the flying subtype with, but in my case, it was just an extra stop in the way, and since she threw out her Altaria first, I basically already won the battle in my mind. And hey, we got our own Flygon now after we saw Aaron's earlier this part. Welcome to the fully evolved Club Kenny. And yeah, why not? I'll get rid of Dragon Breath for Dragon Claw. I tend to prefer Dragon Claw myself. I recognize your talent and present you with this gym badge. With the Feather Badge, all Pokemon up to level 70, even those received through trades, will obey your every command. You will also be able to use the HM move Fly outside of battle. And this is a gift from me. And we get the TM from Roost from her, which I don't use but can definitely be a bit of a game changer. Roost. With this move, the user can restore its HP by up to half of its max HP by landing on the ground and resting its injured body. However, the user loses its flying type designation during the turn, so be cautious. You won against me. I know you'll keep aiming higher and higher. Someday you may even fly up into the sky. That's the impression I get from you. So yeah, Roost is a potentially very good heal for mid-battle, but the big issue is they actively lose the flying type designation, so a very good Earthquake can take them out during that turn on top of that, so watch out in that regard. With that, we're now done in Fortree, so it's time for us to move on to Route 120 and slowly head our way towards our next major city. With that said, between notable new Pokemon along Route 120, I do want to take a moment to talk about the other 2 Mega Evolutions the starters get here in Hoenn and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, since we did just see Mega Blaziken. Notably, the final evolution for Mudkip is Swampert, thus Mega Swampert, and the final evolution for Trico is Sceptile, thus Mega Sceptile. But really quickly though, we are going to have a new Pokemon in this fight. This bird tamer is going to throw out Xatu, a Generation 2 Psychic Flying type, so it's weak to Rock, Ghost, Electric, Ice, and Dark. Xatu is a perfectly usable special attacking flying type. Good speed, good special attack. Not super standout in those stats, I might add, but still completely usable. Ability-wise, it also gets some pretty interesting ones on top of its learn set. Synchronize, Early Bird, or Magic Bounce. I want to say the only one of those 3 abilities we haven't talked about yet is Magic Bounce, which Magic Bounce is effectively what if the attack Magic Coat was an ability. If a list of certain status-changing moves are used on Pokemon with that ability, they're automatically reflected back at the user. That can be a real game changer in some cases, and honestly, if there's a Xatu I really recommend getting, it is one with that ability, but in general, Xatu is a really usable Psychic type. I just have preferences for Psychic or Flying types that I might go for first in a lot of given generations where Xatu is available. Going back to the other 2 starters Mega Evolutions, we've already talked about Marsh Stomp and how that's a water-ground type, but when it evolves into a Swampert, it keeps that subtyping, as does Mega Swampert. Instead of the Torrent or Damp ability that Swampert itself can normally have, Mega Swampert has Swift Swim, so in rain, its speed is boosted, which is notably useful because I think off the top of my head, it's the slowest of the 3 starter Mega Evolutions. In the process of Mega Evolving, Swampert gains an additional 40 physical attack, 20 physical defense, 10 special attack, 20 special defense, and 10 extra speed. Perfectly usable, but I think out of the 3 Mega Evolutions the Hoenn starters get, Swampert's is probably my least favorite, both in look and use. But we'll talk about the one that's probably my overall favorite, even compared to Mega Blaziken in a few moments. Right now, we need to talk about this trainer's Milotic. Milotic evolves from Feebas in one of two ways depending on the generation. If you're playing an entry where the contest stats are actively a thing, a Feebas will evolve into a Milotic if it's leveled up with its beauty stat high enough. Otherwise, it'll evolve when traded when holding a Prism Scale. Milotic is notably a pure water type, so it is weak against grass and electric. If you actively went through the effort to find a Feebas back when that was really annoying, you were easily rewarded for your efforts because Milotic has great special stats all around, good HP. Its only real weakness is its physical attack, but especially prior to the physical special split, that didn't really matter given water used the special stat always. Ability-wise, Milotic can have Marvel Scale, Competitive, or Cute Charm. Marvel Scale will increase the Pokemon's physical defense if it has a status condition of some sort, so that actively does make up for its low physical defense stat. Competitive, which was introduced in Gen 6, will boost its special attack stat when any of its other stats are lowered, including the special attack stat, so that can actively go a long way pretty quickly. And Cute Charm can just cause infatuation upon contact, as we talked about before. It's probably the least of the abilities you can get, honestly. If you manage to get a Feebas back on the route we could find it earlier in Hoenn, I'd really recommend it if you haven't found a good water type you want on your team for the end game yet. It's just so usable. At this point, let's talk about Trico's line's Mega Evolution. Upon leveling up to level 36 and evolving into its final state, Trico becomes a Sceptile, which is still a pure grass type, but if you Mega Evolve it, not only does its ability change, it gains a subtyping. Mega Sceptile is notably a Grass Dragon type. That does mean it has a good amount of weaknesses, notably it's weak to Flying, Poison, Bug, Ice, Dragon, and Fairy, with Ice being a 4x weakness. But, and this is something I actively forgot to talk about earlier, and I got wrong a little earlier in this part because I actively have recorded this across 2 days. The Lightning Rod ability that Sceptile gains in the Mega Evolution makes it completely immune to electricity, so sorry Seaking, you're actively a little better than I said you were earlier this very part. Sorry about that. In Mega Evolving, Sceptile gains an extra 25 physical attack, 10 defense, a whopping 40 special attack, and 25 speed. This is a very good Mega Evolution, as while it has a lot of weaknesses, in a lot of cases those Pokemon aren't probably going to get a chance to do damage to it anyway, especially if you take advantage of Stab and its absurd speed stat. Getting back to what's actually happening on screen though, Route 120 is one of the longer routes in the game, and thus there's a surprising amount of Pokemon trainers along here, so don't be surprised if you actively start running low on either healing items or HP or PP as you actively venture through it. With that said, now that we have the Fly HM, that's not necessarily an issue in a lot of cases, as Fly, when used outside of battle, acts as a fast travel point to any city in the game. In fact, I think in Gen 6 here especially, it's even more than that. I think it actively allows you to fly to a lot of just off-area routes and all that, so you can get to a lot of the region really quickly now, which is very useful. So if you're running low on stock, grab Fly, head on back to the previous town, stock back up, and then just walk your way back down. And since there's going to be less fights along the way through the amount of Pokemon trainers you've already cleared, gonna be pretty easy to get back to where you were. Worth noting, this specific Aroma Lady here will give you a berry every single day that's random, which, hey, if you're trying to do stuff with berries, could come in handy pretty quickly. Now, I've talked a couple times throughout the LP thus far that there's a couple of places I just immediately think of when I think of the Hoenn region in totality. And while a lot of people might think it's probably the more obvious back-end stuff in the game with how the routes are structured there, the first areas I actively think of when I think of Hoenn is this section around Fortree City. Route 119, Route 120, and Route 121. And I think it's probably because, to me as a kid on the GBA, it was probably the most visually striking because it has had such radically different aesthetics to the rest of the game with how tall the grass was and all that. Especially as someone who started with Fire Red, which is a pretty faithful remake of the original game, thus there's not anything super spectacular in the layout of Kanto there. Next new Pokemon, though, is a pretty rare one around here in Route 120. It's, I believe, a 5% encounter rate, but it's a really good one to have around. This is Absol, pure Dark type, so it is weak to Fighting, Bug, and Fairy, but immune to Psychic. Absol has a really good physical attack stat and some good speed and special attack to back it up. Its defenses and HP aren't the greatest, but trust me, it more than makes up for it. While not ever getting an evolution up to this point in time, it's a perfectly usable single-state Pokemon. On top of that, it also got a really good Mega Evolution here in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Before I go back to talk about that, though, this guy has another new Pokemon. This is Cacturn. This evolves from Cacnea at level 32. Grass Dark type, so it's weak to fighting, flying, poison, bug, fire, ice, and fairy. Notably, bug is a 4x weakness and immune to psychic. Cacturn has great mixed attack stats, but between its low speed and fragile defenses, the amount of weaknesses it has make it not too worth using my eyes. I love the line, I love its looks, and I've used it pretty well in the past, but it's enough weaknesses where I just kind of tend to not use it. So, ability-wise, Absol can have Pressure, which actively doubles the PP usage of any Pokemon on the opponent's side of the screen from it. Super Luck, which boosts the crit hit ratio of any moves by 1 stage naturally. Honestly, all 3 make for pretty good choices. I personally prefer Super Luck myself. But notably, when you Mega Evolve it, it instead gets Magic Bounce for its ability. As for Mega Absol itself, in the process of Mega Evolving, Absol will gain 20 physical attack, 40 special attack, and another 30 speed, making it a very fast mixed attacker, and what few issues I might have with the Absol line really gets solved by that. I love Mega Absol, and I've used its base form and its Mega to pretty good effect in both the original playthroughs of Hoenn on the Game Boy Advanced and on my first playthrough of Alpha Sapphire. In fact, if I recall my end-of-game team on my first playthrough of Alpha Sapphire correctly, I think 4 of the 6 Pokemon could Mega Evolve, and they were always holding their Mega Stone, so I had a pretty good pick of choosing for what I could actively throw out there, because I had a Blaziken, the other end state for Ralts, an Altaria, an Absol, a Ludicolo, and a Slacking, if I recall correctly. I may have told some Pokemon in and out for certain instances here and again, but yeah, that team served me pretty well across that playthrough. We're coming up on the end of Route 120, but there's still a couple of trainers with new Pokemon, on top of the fact there's a very good to grab hidden item over here if you want to use a very specific electric type from an upcoming area very well. Notably, on a big chunk of grass coming up here on the right, if you hug the very top of it and mash the A button, you'll eventually find yourselves a Light Ball. Light Balls, when held by the Pokemon Pikachu, double both of its attack stats. In fact, if you breed it and get a Pichu out of it, that Pichu will know the very good move Volt Tackle by default. Very good item to have around. This trainer's going to throw out our next new Pokemon, though. They're going to throw out Manectric. Manectric evolves from Electric at level 26. It is a pure electric type, so it's weak to ground. Really good special attack and speed, but between its abilities being Static, Lightning Rod, or Minus by default, it's fine. There's just other electric types I like more. Notably, though, it does have a Mega Evolution that switches its ability out for Intimidate, and its Mega Evolution gives it an extra boon of 10 physical defense, 30 extra special attack, actually, 20 extra special defense, and another 30 speed. The Mega Evolution definitely makes this line more useful to me, but there's just electric types I tend to use more often, and I'd rather use the Mega Evolution per battle on something a little better than that, but it's perfectly usable. And this Pokemon Ranger is going to have our final new Pokemon for the part. They're going to throw out Grumpig. Grumpig evolves from Spoink at level 32. Pure Psychic type, so it's weak to Bug, Ghost, and Dark. Can have Thick Fat, Own Temple, and Gluttony for its abilities. I personally recommend Thick Fat if you want to use one. Grumpig's a perfectly fine Psychic type. Decent special attack, really good special defense. There's just other Pokemon that can fulfill this role better for my own tastes. I do love its design, though. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 17, we're going to move on to Route 121 and see what awaits us over there. See you guys then.